Hola. Hello, everyone. I am Hubert cousin, presenting my PhD research at the University of Dundee, Reclaim Water Potential in Scotland, Barriers and Opportunities. In a context of growing pressures on water systems and with a projected increase in drought frequency and severity and duration, even in Scotland, alternative solutions like reclaimed water grows in interest. Yet the research in Scotland is limited. The diagram on the right is a summary of the literature review showing interconnected and interlocked barriers in a complex system where you have a lack of incentives to engage with any reclaimed water policy. Therefore, the question in such a context, how do you develop it? To do so, the methodology is a comparative legal analysis of the European Commission, the French, Portuguese, and Spanish regulations with the objective to address Scotland's lack of a regulation. It is followed by a qualitative case study in Murcia, Spain, the European leader of reclaimed water. The objective was to identify how they fulfill their potential, but also what lessons you can learn from the Scottish perspective. So in Scotland, qualitative methods were interviews with stakeholders from the whiskey and golf industry, focus groups with communities, and one policy workshop with key organizations. The objective was to identify how it is perceived in a country like Scotland. The last part is GIS opportunity mapping. Requirements under the new recast of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive were assessed to identify where it will apply in Scotland if Scotland were to adopt it. Finally, a multi-criteria decision analysis and analytic hierarchy process were used under different policy scenarios that you can see on the bottom right, and attributes were selected based on the literature or in the data collected during the interviews and focus groups. The objective is simple, inform policy planning of reclaimed water in the country. So results are presented by theme. So the first one is the case study in Murcia. So there are important contextual elements to present. There is a current and future water deficit in the region. Spain and Murcia have historic irrigation networks from the hydraulic paradigm, which is also the development of reclaimed water in the region. The need for agricultural irrigation is constant and very high, and for Scotland, these are the characteristics of industrial applications. And as you can see below, this was described the same way by one stakeholder. The second lesson aims to be a bit provocative, is that reclaimed water scarcity does not drive reclaimed water. Participants yet, they instinctively mention it. We have the water needs, but in the end, after when you analyze the data, stakeholders mention the importance of policy instruments, which I will present later. Therefore, the most important factor has been mentioned is political commitment, and this has strong implication when you're in a country like Scotland with less water scarcity. The policy instruments were described before, treatment infrastructure planning and investment, creation of a public entity for wastewater management, which is SAMUR, a regulation, public awareness, and definition of a pricing system at a competitive price for farmers. And there were also subsidies for irrigation systems. Practical solutions were end users and public visits of urban wastewater treatment plants, pilot projects for technical knowledge, of course, but also to spread the word among farmers, and water mixing. A set of lessons concern the technical nature of reclaimed water. One lesson learned over there during my field trip was that new solutions come with new problems. Water mixing mentioned is used to reduce the adverse agronomic issues of reclaimed water. Modernized irrigation networks call for renewable energy sources to meet high energy requirements. And also the multiple technical solutions in the region did not fix a situation that was called unsustainable by many stakeholders, as you can see below too. The second theme is perceptions of reclaimed water in Scotland. So starting with factors that are a bit more positive. Climate effects were unfortunately experienced and projected to get worse by participants, and some impacts were already reported. For example, the whiskey distillery having to shut down 7 weeks due to the lack of water. But it was also perceived positively because it was a way of valuing water better because you were providing lower quality of water to non-essential uses. Successful examples of reclaimed water were also mentioned: Spain, Namibia, Australia, etc. Yet there were some aspects that were a bit more, I would say, ambivalent. This was the case with trust, which was described as a system. You needed trust within different organizations, yet that trust wasn't always there. Participants also mentioned other priorities, and in some cases it would be in synergy with the development of reclaimed water, and sometimes it wasn't. Lastly, consumer perceptions were really important for end users, particularly the whiskey industry, but they were uncertain about what it would be. Finally, there were also doubts and concerns. Health risks were well identified and mostly perceived for agricultural irrigation due to emerging contaminants. In opposition, and industrial applications were favored as perceived as less risky. End users identified risk to their activity. For example, the whiskey's character was one that came a lot. And in terms of economics, the cost efficiency was questioned, but also the cost of no water was recognized. Practical considerations were often mentioned a lot, notably due to their original source of supply, because it will have consequences in terms of quality, reliability, vulnerability, etc. And finally, I would say that a few participants questioned the reliance on technical solutions to adapt and tackle climate change. Participants identified solutions to reduce risk. They emphasized on water quality, and the role of quality standard was well understood. Public and users' awareness was mentioned as really essential, yet was described as currently really low. When questioned, and users perceived the visits of treatment facilities that were mentioned in Mercia. And lastly, participants in the focus groups called for investments and planning, which are absolutely essential. The third theme is regulation. As I said, its role was well understood by participants. And users called for consultations in the development phase. And in the policy workshop, participants identified multiple roles to regulation related to these interconnected barriers we mentioned before. It will have consequences on the terms of price, public acceptance, and risk management. In the regulation studies, important features are a permit to use and supply reclaimed water, a point of compliance at the end use, and a mandatory risk management plan. When questioned on this risk management plan, it was perceived positively by end users, yet they called for practical and economic considerations. And finally, one policymaker described the spirit of this regulation as good, as it gives more control to the regulator. I would say also that there are interesting aspects worth noting. There is a planning aspect in the Spanish regulation for the River Basin Authority and urban agglomerations. There are prohibitions in the French and Spanish regulation that could be interested in Scottish context. And finally, a comparison of quality requirements show, of course, a uniformization for agricultural irrigation, but also a new quality class in Spain, in the Spanish regulation, and there could be a future harmonization for industrial and urban applications. So the last theme is GIS opportunity mapping. So in the east of the country, the region with the driest conditions, 17 urban wastewater treatment plants would require tertiary treatment, and 3 would require tertiary and quaternary treatment. Over half of them discharge into the sea, where, of course, de facto reuse is not possible, so there would be greater opportunities there. For the plans, Greater Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, and Aberdeen, they would be required. For medium-sized agglomeration, it was a bit more complicated to identify due to notably a lack of data. However, 10 areas were, as we mentioned, were worth of interest, and in these cases, plans should be drawn to answer public concerns over sewage spills that are really important in the UK right now. Finally, the MCDA and AHP under different scenarios show interesting results. This did go, industrial parks are among the best results in each scenario. At the individual scales, there are really different results between each scenario. So this shows really great trade-off and synergies between scenarios, and that calls for thoughtful and holistic planning. So, is it going? I'm at my that was going to reach my conclusion, but I think I don't need much of a picture, so I can go. 4 points to conclude. The first is that the current potential in Scotland is limited, yet there are some positive aspects. The water, for example, one example is that, it's here, the water provider is trusted and performant. There are different sectoral potential, and industrial application is the one with the most advantages. Therefore, the policy and research focus should be on this type of reuse. Second, Scotland needs catalyst for political action, political commitment. Three are proposed: adopting the recast of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive to develop infrastructural and institutional capacity to develop reclaimed water. Include all the benefits of reclaimed water beyond just water savings, particularly in a country with more water resources, and a legal reform for higher water efficiency and allowing the water provider to supply non-drinking water. Third, a roadmap has been developed. It summarizes findings of the research and is a step-by-step program to develop reclaimed water. The 4 key units are a risk-benefit analysis, environmental policy, technico-economic assessment, and financing policy. Sorry, I can't go much into detail with these. And fourth, the question of who bears the inevitable cost of reclaimed water needs to be answered, but also who it benefits to, and this should be answered with fairness. And reclaimed water should not just be an additional source of water, it should represent a transition of the sector for circular economy and greater sustainability. So these are the references, and thank you.